In the middle of the fourth chapter of Rosh HaShanah, we learnt about the three extra parts of the Musaf Amida, of the silent prayer, the silent additional prayer on Rosh Hashanah, the Zichronot, Malchuyot, and Shofarot, the remembrance verses, the kingship verses, and the Shofar verses. And the Mishnah is going to carry on talking now about the relationship between these verses and the shofar blowing itself. And we'll see, by the way, that the essential shofar blowing, at least in the eyes of the Mishnah, seems to be the shofar blowing during the Musaf Amida, during the silent prayer of Musaf, or maybe during the repetition of Musaf. It's not quite clear. But the Mishnah begins anyway. If the person who passes before the ark, this means the Shaliach Tzibur, or if one person passes before the ark on the festival of Rosh HaShanah, Hasheni Matkia, the second one blows the shofar. And this is completely incomprehensible. What is the first one and what is the second one? And makes you realize, by the way, that you know how much we rely on Maimonides, because you couldn't, and for that matter on the Gemara, you just could not understand this Mishnah without the commentators. But Maimonides explains that this was enacted at a time of persecution, and there were guards over the person actually reading the Shacharit prayer. So the Shaliach Tzibur for Shacharit, and this must be Rosh Hashanah. The person passing before the ark on Rosh Hashanah. This must be the person, the Shaliach Tzibur for Shacharit. So the Rambam says there were guards over him so that he should not sound the shofar. Sounds a bit like the 1940s in the Western Wall, when you'd be arrested. In the time of the Mandate, you could be arrested if you sounded a shofar at the Western Wall, and there were kids who kind of sneaked in with a shofar hidden in their clothes and would just blow it and then get arrested. So there were guards making sure that he wouldn't sound the shofar. But then after the Amida was completed, the guards would leave, and therefore the person who leads the Musaf prayer, the Shaliach Tzibur for Musaf, blows the shofar. That's how the Rambam interprets this. Hasheni matkia, the second one blows the shofar. The second one is the Shaliach Tzibur for Musaf. So, and today, by the way, we have one person to blow and one person to recite the prayers. But the point is that they happen at the same time, and they happen during Musaf. And the Mishnah goes on to mention, by the way, Ubishat HaHalel, Harishon Makret HaHalel. And at the time of Hallel, this is not, by the way, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So this is on a regular festival. Rishon Makret Hallel, the first one recites Hallel. This is the person who recites Shacharit. In other words, the Baal Tefillah of Shacharit on a regular festival recites Hallel. The Baal Tefillah of Musaf on Rosh Hashanah blows the shofar. How does it work? Well, the Mishnah is going to explain. Shofar shel Rosh Hashanah, the shofar of Rosh Hashanah. Before we explain how it's going to work, we're just going to put down some restrictions. So the shofar Rosh Hashanah, ein mavirin alav et hatchum, ve'ein mfakchin alav et hagal, lo olin ba'ilan, ve'lo rochfin al gibei ha'bema, ve'lo shatin al pnei ha'mayim, ve'ein hotchin oto bein b'davar shehu mishum shvut, uvein davar shehu mishum lo ta'aseh. This shofar Rosh Hashanah, we don't break Shabbat for it. So we don't go past the Shabbat border. We don't clear away a pile of rocks. We don't climb a tree. We don't ride on an animal. We don't swim. We don't basically do any of the things which are forbidden on Shabbat. We don't cuss it, either with an instrument which is forbidden because of Shvut. So that would be an instrument, I guess, that we wouldn't normally pick up on Rosh Hashanah, or an instrument that's forbidden because of Lo Ta'aseh. An instrument that's really genuinely forbidden to use on Rosh Hashanah. I think that might be something like an axe, something which can only be used for a forbidden act, but I'm not sure there. Avalim ratzali ten wine or yain yitem. But if he wants to pour wine or water into it, he may do so. So in other words, you can perform an act. If it sounds better wet, you can perform an act that will just help it sound a bit better wet. But we won't break Shabbat to blow the shofar. And of course, now you can see why we don't blow the shofar on when Rosh HaShanah falls on Shabbat, because we don't want people to do any of these things. We don't prevent children from blowing the shofar. This is on Rosh HaShanah, by the way. So if a child is blowing on Rosh HaShanah, we don't stop them. We practice with them until they learn how. This is really fascinating. On Rosh HaShanah, if a child wants to play with a shofar, you practice with them, you teach them, because we want them to learn. Education is important. Of course, we've learned already the question of intention. We have to have the intention to fulfill the mitzvah. Remember, the Mishnah said that if you just happen to be living behind the shul and you hear the shofar, you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah unless you intend to hear it. And the Mishnah said, look, two people have both physically heard it, but one fulfills the mitzvah and one doesn't, if one intends to and the other doesn't. And if someone intends to practice, they don't intend to fulfill the mitzvah. So the Mishnah then concludes, Hamitasek lo yatsa, someone who's just practicing hasn't fulfilled. Ve'hashomea min hamitasek lo yatsa, someone who hears from someone who's just practicing hasn't fulfilled their obligation, because you need to hear from someone who has the intention to fulfill, well, his obligation and yours. So then back to the shofar blowing. Well, how do we blow on Rosh HaShanah? Seder tekiyot shalosh shel shalosh. So there are 3 blasts of 3 each. And this is really interesting because we've got a tradition of blowing 100 blasts on Rosh HaShanah, but Mishnah is basically saying, look, you can get away with 9. You can get away with 9 blasts. Why 3 and 3? Well, the Bartanura says these 3 sets actually correspond to the Malchuyot, Zichronot, and Shofarot. This is why we can see they're connected to the Musaf Amida. And we learned, by the way, in the previous Mishnah, they're blown during the Amida. So there's one set of 3. There's one set of 3 for Malchuyot, one set of 3 for Shofarot, one set of 3 for Zichronot. That's how it works. Shiur tekiah shalosh truot, and the tekiah, we have a teruah in the middle, and it's surrounded by two tekiyahs. A tekiah is like 3 truot, and the amount of a truah, shir hatruah shalosh yivavot. The length of a truah is 3 yivavot, and a yivavah is some kind of sigh. The Gemara relates it, we said, to the mother of Sisera. It's some kind of sigh, some kind of wail. She's crying because her rapist son hasn't come back. And we kind of think about the fact that, look, every boy, even if he's a rapist and a murderer, has a mother who cares about him. If someone sounded the first tekiah, that is the tekiah before the truah, and then he prolonged the second one. So we've got tekiah, teruah, tekiah. He blows a really long tekiah. He blows it double. It seems to run into the next one effectively. And the Mishnah says, Ein biyado eila echat. He's only got one. In other words, however long you blow a note, it's just one note. And that's why, by the way, you hear the shofar blow, he makes a break. He goes, tekiah, teruah, tekiah, and then he makes a little break before the next tekiah, and then teruah and tekiah. This is clearly someone who hasn't had the opportunity to hear shofar, someone who's berach, who's blessed. This must be to say the Musaf Amida. And afterwards, he finds a shofar, or somehow he comes upon a shofar. Tokea Umeria v'tokea shalosh pamim. He sounds 9 times. He does a tekiah and a teruah and a tekiah 3 times. So again, we're learning that you only need 9 blasts to fulfill your obligation. And then, you may ask, by the way, why do we need so many blasts? Well, I think the quick answer is we know we need to blow tekiah, teruah, tekiah, but we don't know really what the teruah sounds like. Is it like a shivarim or like a teruah, or maybe like a shivarim, teruah together? So the reason we triple it up is we know we got to blow 3 teruahs, but we don't quite know what you have to do to blow a teruah. So we try 3 different ways. Anyway. Shem, sheshaliach tzibur chayav, kach kol yachid v'yachid chayav. Just as the shaliach tzibur is obligated, every single individual is obligated. In other words, we all have to recite Shmona Esrei, even if we hear it from the shaliach tzibur. And this is the point at which the Mishnah will conclude. We've been dancing around the question of intention right the way through this Masechet. We had the brass serpent. We had Moshe holding his hands up while Joshua was waging war against the Amalekites. We've had the tension between halachic reality and physical reality, a question of the intention of the Bet Din to sanctify the new moon. The question of intention runs right the way through this Masechet. And we're going to close on the question of obligation intention. Everybody needs to recite Shmona Esrei for themselves. They can't rely on the Shaliach Tzibur. And you know what? Rabban Gamliel is going to disagree. Rabban Gamliel omer Shaliach Tzibur motzi et harabim yedei chovatam. Rabban Gamliel says, no, I don't agree. The Shaliach Tzibur enables the whole congregation to fulfill their obligation. In other words, you can fulfill your obligation to pray by listening to the Shaliach Tzibur. And the Gemara doesn't quite know what to do with this. It seems to know the halacha goes according to the Mishnah, but it can't ignore Rabban Gamliel. And the Rambam actually puts it very nicely for us. The halacha k'Rabban Gamliel b'tfilah she Rosh HaShanah v'she Yom Kippurim bilvad. The halacha is according to Rabban Gamliel only on Rosh HaShanah and Yom Kippur. Because of the length of the prayers on those 2 days. So somehow on those 2 days, you can rely on the Shaliach Tzibur, but for the rest of the year, you cannot. For the rest of the year, you need to recite the Tefillah. That is the conclusion of the tractate of Rosh HaShanah. Hadran alach Masechet Rosh HaShanah. We will return to you, tractate Rosh HaShanah. V'hadrach alan, and you will return to us. Da'atan alach Masechet Rosh HaShanah ve'da'atach alan. Our mind is on you, tractate Rosh HaShanah, and your mind is on us. Lo nitnashei minach Masechet Rosh HaShanah. We will not forget you, Masechet Rosh HaShanah. We cannot forget you. Velo titnashei minach, and you will not forget us. Lo ba'alma hadain velo ba'alma da'ati. Not in this world and not in the next world.